Dog won't stop scratching a stranger's backpack. What police found inside shocked everyone. The steady hum of voices filled the air at Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport, blending with the rhythmic clatter of rolling suitcases and the occasional crackle of the overhead intercom. Officer Sarah Collins adjusted her grip on Max's leash, her sharp eyes sweeping the crowded terminal with practiced precision. The Belgian Malinois at her side moved with quiet alertness, his ears twitching at the subtle sounds that most would ignore. Max had always been more than just a police dog. He was her partner, her protector, her unwavering second pair of eyes in a world where danger lurked in the unlikeliest of places. Sarah's job with the K-9 unit wasn't glamorous, but it was one she took seriously. She had seen enough in her 7 years on the force to know that the difference between a routine patrol and a crisis could be a matter of seconds. Today, the airport bustled more than usual. Business travelers strode purposefully toward their gates, their polished shoes clicking against the tiled floor, while families struggled with strollers and overstuffed carry-ons. A group of teenagers huddled near a charging station, their laughter bright and oblivious to the unseen layers of security keeping them safe. Sarah watched them for a moment, letting the noise settle in her mind, before giving Max a subtle signal to continue their patrol. His tail flicked, his muscles tensed slightly in anticipation, but he remained obedient, walking at her side as they wove through the sea of travelers. Max had been trained to detect explosives, drugs, and even chemical agents, his senses far surpassing those of any human. He had already intercepted a smuggler earlier in the year and helped uncover a hidden stash of fentanyl disguised as baby formula. But for all his training, Sarah trusted something beyond the rigorous drills and certifications. She trusted his instincts. She had learned long ago that when Max fixated on something, there was always a reason. The moment came unexpectedly, as it often did. One second they were nearing the security checkpoint, nodding to a TSA officer who recognized them from previous rounds. The next, Max stiffened, his head snapping to the left, nostrils flaring as he caught an invisible scent. His tail, which had been relaxed, went rigid, and then he pulled, not violently, but with unmistakable determination. Sarah immediately followed his lead, her grip firm, but allowing him the room to guide her. "Max, what is it?" she murmured, her voice low enough that only he could hear. Max's nails clicked against the polished floor as he moved purposefully toward a lone man standing near a Starbucks, waiting for his drink order. He was dressed in a tailored navy suit, his shoes expensive but practical, the kind worn by men who spent more time in airport lounges than in their own homes. A sleek black backpack hung over one shoulder, the strap pressing neatly against the pristine fabric of his jacket. He checked his watch, then his phone, his movements smooth, unhurried. Sarah observed him quickly, her mind cataloging the details. Age, late 30s, height, around 6 feet, build, lean but athletic. Nothing about him screamed suspicious. But Max disagreed. The dog moved closer, his nose brushing against the backpack, before he let out a short, sharp bark. The man startled, taking half a step back, eyes widening as he finally noticed the K-9 unit so close to him. "Sir," Sarah said, her tone professional but firm, "I'm Officer Collins with the airport K-9 unit. My partner has alerted to your bag. I need you to remain where you are." The man's expression shifted in an instant. Surprise flickered into something controlled, something measured. His lips parted as if he were about to protest, but he caught himself, instead offering a tight smile. "There must be some mistake," he said, his voice smooth, cultured. "I travel through this airport all the time. There's nothing in my bag that should concern you." Max barked again, pawing at the backpack this time, his intensity growing. Sarah felt her heartbeat quicken. False alerts happened, but they were rare, and Max was never this insistent without cause. "I'm going to have to ask you to set the bag down," she said evenly, her gaze locked on the man's face, searching for the telltale micro-expressions she had learned to read. There it was, a flicker of tension around his jawline, a brief hesitation before his fingers flexed against the strap. He was deciding something. Sarah's stance shifted slightly, her free hand hovering near her radio. Every instinct in her body told her this was about to escalate. The man exhaled, shaking his head as if this were all a minor inconvenience. All right, he said, kneeling to place the bag on the floor with deliberate movements. But I'd appreciate it if you hurried. I have a flight to catch. Sarah didn't respond. Instead, she gave Max the command to stay as she signaled a nearby officer for backup. The businessman straightened, rolling his shoulders as if shaking off discomfort. His eyes flicked toward the exit. And then he ran. It happened fast. 1 second he was standing still, composed, and the next he spun on his heel and bolted, weaving through the crowd with startling agility. Sarah didn't think. She reacted. "Stop! Police!" she shouted, already giving Max the go command. Max lunged forward, his body a streak of muscle and precision, dodging startled travelers as Sarah sprinted after them. The man shoved past a woman with a rolling suitcase, nearly knocking her over. But he didn't slow. His trajectory was clear. He was heading for the emergency exit near the far end of the terminal. If he made it through that door, they'd lose valuable time. Sarah's breath burned in her chest, but she pushed forward, closing the distance. Ahead, Max was relentless, his speed unmatched as he pursued his target with singular focus. The businessman veered sharply, aiming for a service corridor. Sarah reached for her radio. "Suspect fleeing on foot, Terminal B, heading toward maintenance access." Her words barely left her mouth before she saw Max make his move. The dog launched, his powerful hind legs propelling him forward as he clamped onto the man's arm with precision. A cry of pain split the air as they crashed to the floor, Max holding firm but controlled, just as he had been trained. Sarah reached them seconds later, drawing her cuffs as the man struggled beneath Max's grip. "Don't move," she ordered, her voice sharp. "It's over." The man's breath came fast, his chest heaving as he stared up at her, realization settling in. Max remained still, his grip firm but measured, his deep brown eyes locked onto the suspect as if daring him to try something. Sarah yanked the man's hands behind his back, securing the cuffs as additional officers arrived. The tension in her muscles didn't ease. Not yet. Her gaze flicked back to the abandoned backpack sitting near the Starbucks counter. If Max was right, and he always was, then whatever was inside could be far worse than a fleeing suspect. The air inside the terminal felt heavier now, thick with a tension that hadn't been there moments before. Sarah stood over the cuffed man, her breath steadying as she reached for her radio. "Suspect in custody, Terminal B, requesting bomb squad and immediate security lockdown on the surrounding area," she said, her voice clipped, her mind already calculating the next moves. Around her, travelers murmured in confusion, some pausing mid-step, others pulling out their phones, sensing something bigger was happening. Max remained still, standing over the suspect, his body coiled like a spring, ears alert for the next command. Sarah gave him a quick pat between the shoulder blades, a silent reassurance that he had done well. The man beneath her, breathing hard against the polished tile, remained eerily quiet now. No more protests, no more indignant claims of innocence, just silence and a cold, measured stare. Two uniformed officers arrived at a run, their eyes darting between Sarah, the subdued suspect, and the black backpack that sat only 20 feet away. "We got him," Sarah said, standing, keeping a firm grip on the man's shoulder. "But we need to clear the area immediately." One of the officers, a tall, stocky man with a deep furrow between his brows, nodded and began waving back curious bystanders. "Everyone move back now," he ordered, his voice carrying through the terminal. People hesitated but then obeyed, a ripple of movement pulling them away from the danger zone. Sarah's focus snapped back to the suspect as she crouched down beside him. "You made a mistake running," she said, keeping her voice even but pressing just enough authority into her tone. "You want to tell me what's in the bag before the bomb squad gets here?" The man didn't look at her. His jaw tightened. A bead of sweat trailed down his temple despite the cool, climate-controlled air. He exhaled sharply, shaking his head once, then let out a short, humorless laugh. "It doesn't matter now," he muttered, his voice barely above a whisper. "You're already too late." A cold shiver crawled down Sarah's spine. She knew bravado when she heard it, knew when suspects bluffed to regain control of the situation. But this wasn't a bluff. This was certainty, a deep, unwavering belief in whatever plan he thought had already set into motion. She glanced at Max, who remained locked onto the man, his chest rising and falling in steady precision. He didn't move, didn't react. But Sarah knew he could feel it too. Something wasn't right. The sound of boots against tile echoed as the bomb squad arrived. Dressed in their heavy protective gear, their expressions unreadable behind tinted visors. A lead technician moved forward, a bulky black case in his hands, scanning the bag from a distance before slowly approaching. Every muscle in Sarah's body tensed. Her fingers itched to keep hold of Max's leash tighter, even though she knew he wouldn't lunge unless commanded. The entire airport felt like it had gone eerily silent, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. One of the technicians pulled a small robotic device from the case, a wheeled drone no larger than a shoebox, and set it onto the floor. It whirred softly, moving forward in precise, controlled motions toward the backpack. The screen on the technician's handheld device flickered to life, displaying a grainy infrared scan of the bag's contents. The moment Sarah saw the image, her pulse spiked. Cylindrical object, metal casing, wires, no visible trigger yet. But that didn't mean it wasn't there. The lead technician turned slightly, speaking in hushed tones into his radio. Then to Sarah, "We need to evacuate a wider radius, now." Sarah didn't need to be told twice. "All units, expand perimeter lockdown, clear all civilians from Terminal B immediately," she said into her radio, already stepping back, pulling the suspect with her as the officers worked quickly to move the remaining stragglers. Airport security and additional police were arriving now, forming a barricade, their faces grim as they directed passengers away from the scene. The suspect, despite being restrained, no longer fought. He simply watched, observed. Sarah hated that more than anything. The way he seemed almost detached, as if his fate had already been sealed, as if he knew something no one else did. The technician moved with practiced precision, kneeling beside the bag now, his gloved hands working quickly, checking for pressure plates, secondary triggers, anything that might turn a bad situation worse. The waiting was unbearable. Seconds stretched, each one feeling like an eternity. And then, Sarah saw it. The technician's hands froze. A heartbeat later, his voice was calm but firm through the radio. "We have a live agent. I repeat, confirmed chemical agent detected." The words landed like a gut punch. Sarah didn't need to see the expression behind his visor to know what it meant. Explosives were bad enough. But chemicals? A biological or nerve agent? That was a different kind of terror entirely. A silent, invisible killer that could spread before anyone even realized what was happening. Sarah turned sharply to the suspect, her patience snapping. "What the hell is in that bag?" she demanded. The man exhaled, tilting his head back, looking almost relieved. "It's already begun," he murmured. Max let out a low growl, his stance shifting as if sensing Sarah's rising anger. She had dealt with criminals who thought they were untouchable before, but this was different. This wasn't just a man trying to escape consequences. This was someone who truly believed in whatever nightmare he had planned. The lead technician worked quickly, issuing orders to his team. "We need a hazmat team here now. If this is what I think it is, containment is priority." Sarah barely heard him. Her mind was moving fast, piecing together details. The way the suspect had run, the lack of an immediate detonation, the confidence in his words. He wasn't just carrying a random device. This had been planted with purpose. Her eyes darted around the terminal. Could there be another bag? Another operative? Grabbing her radio, she barked, "We need a full sweep of the airport. All units be advised. There may be additional threats." The suspect let out another quiet laugh. "You're clever," he said, his voice almost admiring, "but not clever enough." Sarah clenched her jaw. She wasn't going to let this bastard get under her skin. "We'll see about that," she muttered. One of the bomb squad officers called out, "We've got markings inside, military-grade dispersal mechanism. This isn't homemade. Someone supplied him." That sent another chill through her. This wasn't some lone wolf acting on his own. This was organized, coordinated, and worst of all, whoever was behind it wasn't finished yet. Max let out another growl, his body tense, his instincts still screaming at something unseen. Sarah didn't need further confirmation. Whatever was happening here, it was bigger than a single man with a backpack. and they were running out of time to stop it. The tension in the air was thick enough to choke on. The beeping of the bomb squad's scanner, the clipped voices of officers relaying commands, the hushed murmurs of nervous airport personnel, it all blended into a tense symphony of barely contained chaos. Sarah kept her grip tight on the suspect's arm, but her focus was everywhere at once, scanning for anything, anyone, that didn't belong. Max's low growl hadn't stopped, his muscles taut, his eyes locked on the suspect with an intensity that made Sarah's pulse quicken. She had trusted Max with her life more times than she could count, and right now he wasn't just on edge. He was preparing for something worse. The bomb squad worked with swift precision, isolating the bag and running another scan for secondary devices. The technician's voice crackled over the comms, calm but clipped with urgency. Confirmed nerve agent canister, military grade, not a crude dispersal system. This was built for efficiency. Sarah felt her stomach tighten. A weapon designed for efficiency meant whoever had planned this attack wasn't just aiming for chaos, they were aiming for mass casualties. The suspect, still pinned under her grip, inhaled deeply through his nose, as if savoring the moment. Sarah turned to face him fully. "Who are you working with?" she asked, keeping her voice level. No accusations, no threats, just the controlled authority she had spent years perfecting. The man smirked. "Doesn't matter," he said, tilting his head slightly. "You think you stopped something today, but you didn't. You only delayed it." His tone was eerily calm, like someone who had already made peace with the consequences. Sarah's jaw tightened. "You'd better start talking, because right now you're looking at terrorism charges, conspiracy, and attempted mass murder. Maybe you think you're untouchable, but I promise you, the people you're protecting won't come for you. They'll leave you to rot." The man chuckled under his breath, shaking his head slightly. "You really don't get it," he murmured. "This was never about me." Max's growl deepened. His body tensed, ears pricking forward as if he had caught something Sarah hadn't. Her heart pounded as she followed his gaze, scanning the terminal beyond the barricades where airport security had corralled the passengers. Her breath caught. A man dressed in an identical Navy suit, walking calmly toward the opposite end of the terminal, a black backpack slung over his shoulder. He wasn't running. He wasn't panicked. He was just walking, disappearing into the sea of people being funneled toward security clearances. Sarah reacted instantly. She shoved the suspect toward the nearest officer. "Hold him!" she barked, already unhooking Max's leash. "Max, go!" The command barely left her lips before Max launched forward, his powerful legs propelling him through the chaos. Sarah tore after him, dodging startled civilians and leaping over abandoned luggage. The second suspect was almost to the exit when he finally noticed them. He hesitated for a fraction of a second, just long enough for Sarah to see the realization flicker across his face. Then, like the first man, he bolted. But Sarah had been chasing criminals long enough to recognize the difference. The first suspect had run because he got caught off guard. This one ran because he knew exactly what he was doing. He didn't weave through the crowd in a blind panic. He moved like someone who had an exit strategy. Someone who knew the layout of the airport, the security weaknesses, the blind spots. Max was gaining, his body sleek and controlled, every movement purposeful. He closed the distance in seconds, his claws scraping against the tile as he lunged. The man twisted at the last second, sidestepping just enough to avoid a full takedown, but not enough to escape Max's bite. Teeth sank into the fabric of his sleeve, dragging him off balance. He stumbled, nearly falling, but instead of trying to fight Max off, his hand went straight for the strap of his backpack. Sarah's stomach dropped. "No!" she shouted. The man yanked the strap, swinging the bag forward, his fingers reaching for something inside. Sarah didn't think. She acted. She threw herself forward, tackling him with all her weight. The impact sent them both crashing to the ground, the backpack skidding across the floor. Max released his grip, immediately repositioning himself, ready to strike again. Sarah scrambled to her knees, grabbing for the man's wrist before he could reach the bag. "Stay down!" she snapped, twisting his arm behind his back. He struggled harder than the first suspect, his body writhing with a strength born from pure adrenaline. His breath was ragged, his muscles straining against her hold. But Sarah had the leverage. She pressed her knee into his back, pinning him. More officers arrived, weapons drawn. One of them kicked the backpack away, then knelt beside her, slapping cuffs onto the suspect's wrists. "Got him," the officer confirmed. Sarah exhaled, her body thrumming with adrenaline, her hands still clenched so tightly that her fingers ached. But the dread in her gut didn't ease. Two men, two identical suits, two backpacks. She turned toward the bag, still lying a few feet away. Her mind raced through possibilities. Could this one contain another nerve agent? A detonator? A fail-safe for the first device? Max stood beside it, sniffing carefully. He didn't bark this time, didn't paw at it. Sarah knew what that meant. Whatever was inside wasn't the same as the first. But that didn't make it any less dangerous. The bomb squad technician arrived, already assessing the situation, his visor reflecting the harsh overhead lights. "Another one?" he asked grimly. Sarah nodded. But Max didn't alert the same way. The technician frowned, opening his scanner. The screen flickered as it mapped the contents. This time there was no cylindrical canister, no obvious explosives, but something else. Sarah's brow furrowed. The shape looked like... Her stomach clenched. A phone. She snapped her gaze to the first suspect, still being held under watch. His eyes met hers across the terminal, and he smiled. It hit her like a sledgehammer. The first device had never been meant to detonate in the airport. It had been a test, a distraction, a way to ensure security resources were focused here while something else, something worse, was happening somewhere else. Sarah spun back to the bomb technician. "That phone," she started, but before she could finish, the screen of the device inside the bag lit up. An incoming call. Sarah didn't hesitate. "Everybody move!" she shouted, grabbing Max's collar and pulling him back just as the technician dove for the backpack. But the phone didn't detonate anything. It didn't trigger a bomb. It was a message. A single line of text flashed across the screen, its meaning clear and chilling. "You stopped nothing." Sarah felt ice settle into her bones. She turned back toward the suspect. He wasn't smiling anymore. He was watching her with something else in his eyes now. Something darker. Anticipation. And that was when the airport alarms blared. A new threat had just been detected, and they were already too late. The blaring airport alarm sent a fresh wave of chaos rippling through the terminal. Passengers froze for a split second before panic took hold, a tidal wave of movement as people scrambled in all directions. Security personnel rushed to contain the surge, their voices lost in the growing roar of confusion. Sarah barely registered the noise. Her pulse hammered in her ears, her vision narrowing on the glowing phone screen still resting inside the second suspect's backpack. "You stopped nothing." The words burned into her mind like a brand, a cruel taunt wrapped in a warning. Max stood at her side, his muscles coiled with tension, his sharp gaze flicking between the restrained suspects and the turmoil unfolding around them. He felt it too, the shift in the air, the silent promise that something worse was coming. Sarah forced her focus back to the immediate danger. "Get that phone isolated," she barked to the bomb squad technician, who was already moving to secure the device in a signal-blocking container. Her brain worked at lightning speed, piecing together what they knew. Two men, two backpacks, one filled with a chemical dispersal device, the other with nothing but a phone and a message. It didn't take a genius to figure out what that meant. This wasn't just a failed attack. This was phase one. The first suspect, the one she had tackled near Starbucks, was staring at her now. His smugness had melted away, replaced by something colder. Calculating, the kind of look that made her skin crawl. She stepped toward him, every muscle in her body wound tight. "Where is it?" she demanded, her voice cutting through the noise. He didn't answer, didn't blink, just tilted his head slightly as if listening for something only he could hear. A countdown, maybe. A signal. Sarah grabbed the front of his jacket, pulling him closer. "If there's another device, you tell me right now," she hissed, her patience gone, her voice edged with a threat she had no problem making real. Still, nothing. The second suspect, now restrained and kneeling on the cold tile, let out a slow, steady breath. "You still don't see it, do you?" he murmured, his voice barely above the chaos. Sarah turned to him sharply, reading every twitch of his face. There was no fear, no desperation, just that same eerie calm. He glanced toward the crowd of civilians still being ushered away. "You're looking in the wrong place." Her stomach turned to ice. The wrong place. Her eyes snapped toward the bomb squad technician, who had just finished sealing the phone inside its protective case. It wasn't the message that mattered. It was the phone itself. Sarah lunged, her fingers already reaching for her radio. "Stop! That phone, it's a trigger!" But even as the words left her lips, the technician's scanner beeped. A secondary signal, one they hadn't detected before. An outgoing transmission, not from the phone in their custody, but from somewhere inside the terminal. And just like that, she knew. The real device wasn't in the backpacks. It had never been. The suspects had been nothing more than decoys, distractions, carefully placed pawns to draw attention away from the actual target. Sarah turned so fast she nearly lost her footing. "We need every officer sweeping the terminal. Now!" she shouted, her voice cutting through the alarms. "Max, seek!" She didn't need to say more. The Belgian Malinois shot forward, his nose already working, his powerful body weaving between stunned civilians and abandoned luggage. Sarah ran after him, her pulse in her throat, her thoughts moving faster than she could process. Where would they plant it? Not in the obvious places. No, this was meant to be hidden in plain sight. Something no one would question. Something everyone walked past. Max's head jerked up. His pace quickened. Sarah pushed herself harder, dodging a baggage cart, ignoring the confused shouts of security officers. Then she saw it, the shift in Max's body language. The moment his nose locked onto something, and his entire stance changed. His tail went stiff, his ears flattened back. He growled low, a sound that sent a fresh jolt of adrenaline through Sarah's veins. He had found it, a trash bin. Not just any bin, one positioned right outside the TSA security checkpoint, where thousands of people had passed by in the last hour alone. Where a device, if triggered, could spread a lethal chemical into one of the most densely populated areas of the airport. Sarah skidded to a stop, pulling out her radio. "Bomb squad to Terminal B, checkpoint entrance. Max has found the real device. Get everyone clear, now!" The officers nearby snapped into action, immediately ushering civilians away from the area. One of the TSA agents looked from Sarah to Max and paled. "That thing's been sitting there for hours," he stammered. Sarah clenched her jaw. "Then we don't have much time." The bomb squad arrived within seconds, their lead technician already scanning the bin from a distance. The results came back almost instantly. A second dispersal device, active. A silent countdown already in progress. Sarah's breath hitched. How much time? The technician's visor reflected the screen of his scanner. His shoulders stiffened. He turned toward her. "Less than 5 minutes." Everything snapped into motion. The terminal lockdown intensified. Civilians were rushed toward the exits as the bomb squad moved in, their hands steady despite the urgency of the situation. Sarah forced herself to step back, to let them do their job, even though every fiber of her being screamed to stay close. Max sat beside her, his body still rigid, his dark eyes locked onto the bin as if willing it to stop ticking down. Sarah kept a hand on his back, grounding herself in his steady presence. 4 minutes. The lead technician knelt beside the bin, his gloved hands working with swift precision. His radio crackled with updates. "Device confirmed to contain nerve agent, military dispersal mechanism. Attempting manual override." 3 minutes. Sarah stole a glance toward the suspects. The first one had turned his head slightly, as if straining to hear something. Sarah realized then he wasn't waiting for the explosion. He was hoping for it. 2 minutes. A bead of sweat trickled down the technician's temple as he worked. The silence around them was suffocating. Then, his fingers paused, the tiniest exhale of relief. "Disarmed." The single word sent a ripple through the gathered officers. Sarah let out a slow breath, her muscles loosening for the first time in what felt like hours. The technician removed the device, sealing it in a containment unit. The immediate threat was over, but Sarah knew the battle wasn't. She turned back to the suspects, stepping toward them with renewed determination. "You failed," she said, her voice steady, "and now you're going to tell me who sent you." The first suspect smiled again. This time it was different. Not fear, not regret, something else. Anticipation. Sarah felt it before she heard it. The crackle of a radio, the murmur of another officer's voice. And then, "Sir, we have another report. A suspicious package just flagged at the train station adjacent to the airport. Same profile. Possible coordinated attack." Sarah's breath stilled. It wasn't over. It was just beginning. The weight of the words settled in Sarah's chest like a stone. A second device. The airport wasn't the only target. The train station adjacent to the terminal, a major transit hub connecting thousands of passengers to the city, was in immediate danger. The bomb squad was still securing the first device. Officers were still managing the panicked crowd. And now there was another threat. Her mind spun, but her body had already decided. She grabbed her radio. "All available units, we need immediate response to the train station. Potential second device, same suspect profile. Lock down all entry points." Max, still tense beside her, flicked his ears at her sharp tone, his tail rigid with focus. He didn't need a command. He already knew they were moving. Sarah barely spared a glance at the restrained suspects as she turned away, but she caught the expression on the first one's face. Satisfaction. Like he had known this moment would come. Like he had been waiting for her to realize the full extent of their plan. Her stomach twisted, but she shoved down the unease. They had to move. The station was a 2-minute sprint from the security checkpoint, but it felt like miles as Sarah and Max tore through the crowded concourse, dodging dazed travelers and security officers struggling to maintain order. The alarm still blared, adding to the confusion, but Sarah's focus was a razor's edge. She pushed harder, her boots pounding against the slick tile, Max a blur of muscle and precision at her side. She could already hear the commotion before she reached the entrance. A cluster of transit security officers had formed a loose perimeter near the turnstiles, their expressions a mix of fear and uncertainty. Beyond them, trains idled on their tracks, sleek metal carriages waiting for passengers who had no idea the danger lurking beneath their feet. Sarah didn't slow. "Where is it?" she called as she approached, flashing her badge. One of the officers, a younger man with sweat slicking his brow, pointed toward the far platform. "A janitor found an unattended suitcase under one of the benches. He radioed it in before we got here." Sarah followed his gesture, eyes locking onto the platform in question. A blue suitcase. Ordinary, almost forgettable. The kind of bag that thousands of travelers wheeled through stations every single day. And yet it sat there, untouched, positioned too perfectly, waiting for someone, anyone, to make a mistake. Sarah's pulse quickened. She turned to Max. "Seek." The dog lunged forward, weaving through the frozen officers, his nose dropping to the floor as he sniffed the air. Sarah followed, her breath shallow as she tracked his every move. The platform stretched wide, the sounds of distant announcements crackling over the PA system, the occasional screech of metal on metal as trains adjusted on the tracks. Max reached the suitcase. His posture changed instantly. Sarah's blood went cold. He had found something. She forced herself to move slower now, to keep her breath even. Her radio was already in her hand. "Bomb squad to train station. Max has detected a device. We need immediate containment." A pause, then, "ETA 3 minutes." They didn't have 3 minutes. Sarah's heart slammed against her ribs as she stepped closer, scanning the suitcase with trained eyes. It was closed but not locked. The zipper slightly ajar, just enough to reveal the glint of something metallic inside. Her pulse pounded in her ears. If this was like the airport device, it could be dispersing toxins even now. Max let out a low whine, his muscles trembling with restraint. He wouldn't move unless she commanded it, but Sarah could feel his unease. She turned back to the transit officers, her voice sharp. "We need to evacuate this station now. No exceptions. Move everyone to street level." They hesitated. "I said move!" The force of her command broke through their paralysis. They scrambled into action, herding confused passengers toward the exits, their voices urgent but controlled. Sarah's mind raced. How much time did they have? If this was the final stage of the attack, there was no reason for the bomb to be sitting idly. It had to be waiting for something. A signal, a trigger, A countdown. She turned her gaze upward. Security cameras. The airport had been a distraction. The suspects had led them there, made sure the authorities swarmed that location. But this was the real target. And if the first trigger had been a phone, what were the chances the second was being controlled remotely? She clicked her radio. Command, we need immediate signal jamming in the station. Cut everything. No incoming or outgoing calls. A pause, then, copy. Cutting external signals now. Sarah's fingers curled into fists as she waited. The seconds dragged. Then, the radio crackled. Signal disruption confirmed. No new transmissions detected. The weight in Sarah's chest didn't fully ease. They had blocked remote detonation, but that didn't mean the bomb was defused. It just meant they had cut off one potential trigger. She turned to Max. Back. The command was soft, careful, but he obeyed instantly, retreating just enough to give space for the bomb squad that would be arriving any second now. And then she saw it. A man, standing just beyond the station exit, near the taxi line. His posture too still, his gaze locked onto the platform. A black phone in his hand. Sarah moved before she could think. She sprinted up the platform stairs, shoving past a couple of confused pedestrians, Max bounding after her. The man saw her coming. He hesitated, just long enough to tell her that he knew exactly why she was running toward him. Then he turned and ran. Sarah bolted after him, her lungs burning as she hit the pavement outside. The cold air slapped her skin, the city's usual noise swallowed by the chaos unfolding behind them. Max was faster. He closed the distance in seconds, launching himself forward. His powerful jaws clamped down on the man's arm, ripping the phone from his grip. Sarah was on him before he could react. She slammed him onto the hood of a parked car, yanking his hands behind his back. "You're done!" she snapped, her breathing hard, her fingers tightening around his wrists. His phone skittered onto the sidewalk. Screen cracked, but still illuminated. A single app was open. A countdown timer. 00040003. Sarah's heart nearly stopped. She grabbed the phone, her fingers scrambling to shut it off, to stop whatever process had already started. But the numbers kept falling. 002001. She clenched her teeth. It was too late, but nothing happened. Sarah's breath came fast and shallow, her grip still crushing the phone in her hand. No explosion, no gas, no detonation. The suspect beneath her chuckled. "Looks like you got lucky," he murmured. Her stomach churned. No, this wasn't luck. This was another misdirection. A fresh report crackled over her radio. "Officer Collins, we just got confirmation. Another package flagged. City Bus Depot. 5 blocks north." Sarah squeezed her eyes shut for half a second, fighting the scream of frustration that clawed up her throat. It wasn't over. Not even close. The radio crackled in Sarah's ear, every syllable of the dispatcher's voice digging into her like a knife. Another package. Bus Depot. 5 blocks north. The nightmare wasn't ending. It was expanding, unfolding like a carefully constructed plan that had been in motion long before she and Max had intercepted that first suspect at the airport. She clenched her teeth, her fingers tightening around the restrained man's wrists as she forced herself to stay focused. "Do you hear that?" she hissed, her voice low but lethal as she leaned closer to the suspect still pinned to the car hood beneath her. "Another bomb. More innocent people in danger. And you're going to tell me where the hell it is before more bodies hit the ground." The man didn't flinch. He barely reacted, his mouth tilting into a smirk that made her stomach twist with rage. "You really don't get it, do you?" His voice was maddeningly calm. "You're just chasing shadows. The second you think you've caught up, you're already behind." Sarah's heart pounded like a war drum. She wanted to press harder, to break him, but there was no time. She spun away, shouting into her radio. "All available units. Bus Depot, 5 blocks north. Evacuate immediately. Bomb squad priority response." She released her suspect to 2 officers who had just arrived on the scene, barking orders to have him transported under maximum security. Then she turned to Max. "Let's move." Max didn't hesitate. He bolted ahead, leading her down the crowded street, weaving through stunned pedestrians as she sprinted after him. The weight of exhaustion clung to her muscles, but she shoved it aside. There was no time for fatigue, no time for doubt. Only time to stop whatever was about to happen next. The bus depot loomed ahead, a massive network of idling buses, their engines humming as drivers waited for their next routes. The street outside was packed, commuters hurrying home, tourists glancing at maps, families wrangling restless children. The idea of a bomb in the middle of all this, the sheer devastation it could cause made bile rise in Sarah's throat. She slowed just long enough to scan the scene. Where? Where would they put it? Then she saw it. Max's nose twitched. His ears flattened. His growl rumbled low and deep. A bus. Not just any bus. One that was already boarding passengers. Sarah's blood turned to ice. If it was already set to leave, "Stop that bus!" she roared, lunging forward, waving her badge as she ran. The driver, confused, blinked at her through the windshield but kept the doors open, his foot still on the brake. Max leapt up the steps first, his body tense, his nostrils flaring as he scanned for the source. Sarah followed, her gaze sweeping the floor, the seats, the luggage compartments. And then, underneath the back row, a black duffel bag tucked neatly out of sight, her stomach clenched. "Everyone off the bus, now!" she shouted, grabbing the nearest commuter and ushering them toward the door. The panic spread like wildfire. People bolted, stumbling over each other in their rush to escape, the driver jumping out of his seat as Sarah shoved past him, making sure the bus was clear. She pulled out her radio, breathless. "Bomb squad, we have a confirmed device on board. Transit bus, southbound lane, bus depot. Need immediate containment." Max let out a sharp bark, his front paws pressing against the seat as he stared at the bag. The message was clear. It was live. Sarah's fingers twitched toward the zipper, but she forced herself to stop. One wrong move and it could trigger. She took a breath, backing away just as the bomb squad van screeched to a halt at the curb. Officers pouring out in full gear. They moved in fast, sweeping the area, positioning their robotic unit for disposal. Sarah stood just outside the bus, Max at her side, watching as the lead technician gave his first assessment. "Device is live," he confirmed. His voice was eerily steady, as if he were discussing the weather. "Timer's running." Sarah's jaw locked. "How long?" He adjusted his scanner, then his posture stiffened. "Less than 90 seconds. Sarah swore under her breath. Too close. The usual containment procedures wouldn't be fast enough. If this was another nerve agent dispersal, they couldn't risk detonating it on site. She turned back toward the bus, her mind spinning through the possibilities. "Can we move it?" The technician hesitated. "Risky. Could have a motion trigger." Sarah clenched her fists. Think. Max's head lifted suddenly. His ears perked. And then Sarah heard it too. A phone ringing. She twisted toward the sound. One of the bomb squad officers had picked up a radio transmission, his face pale as he listened. "They're calling it in," he murmured. The realization hit Sarah like a freight train. The phone wasn't just a countdown. It was the trigger. The bomber was calling it to set it off right now. Sarah lunged for the technician. "Cut the cell signals again. Now!" The command was barely out of her mouth before the tech slammed a button on his control pad. The jammer activated instantly, blanketing the entire area in a dead zone. The ringing phone went silent. For a heartbeat, nobody moved. Then the technician exhaled. "Signal blocked." Sarah's knees nearly gave out. The bomb was still live, but they had bought precious seconds. The squad moved fast, securing the duffel bag, disarming the primary mechanism. After what felt like eternity, the lead tech finally turned to Sarah. "Safe." The weight of the moment hit her like a truck. They had stopped it. No explosion, no chemical release, no casualties. She closed her eyes for half a second before turning back toward the crowd. The suspect had to be here somewhere. Then Max's head jerked up. His eyes locked onto someone in the sea of onlookers. Sarah followed his gaze and saw him. A man dressed like any other commuter, but standing just a little too still, watching a little too closely. Sarah moved before he could react. "Stop right there." The man's eyes widened. He turned, tried to run. Max was faster. He lunged, knocking the man off balance just as Sarah caught up, wrenching his arms behind his back. It was over. Sarah let out a slow breath. staring down at the man now pinned beneath her knee. "You're done," she said, her voice steady, her grip like iron. He didn't fight. He only laughed, a bitter, exhausted sound. "For now," he muttered. Sarah met his gaze, cold, unrepentant, but behind it, defeat. She nodded once. "Yeah, for now." The sirens wailed. Officers swarmed in. Max let out a deep exhale, settling at her side. The job was done. And for now, that was enough. This story is a powerful reminder of the importance of vigilance, quick thinking, and the unbreakable bond between law enforcement officers and their canine partners. In the face of danger, instincts and training can mean the difference between disaster and survival. Max wasn't just a dog, he was a hero, proving that sometimes the most crucial intelligence comes not from technology, but from unwavering loyalty and keen senses. It also highlights a chilling reality. Threats can exist in the places we least expect, carried out by those who blend seamlessly into everyday life. But courage, teamwork, and determination will always stand as the first line of defense against those who seek to harm others. Let this be a lesson that the world is unpredictable, but there are always those willing to step up, protect, and make a difference. Thank you for watching, and if you enjoyed this gripping story, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to our channel for more incredible tales of bravery and resilience. Stay safe, stay aware, and we'll see you in the next video.